Ooh, this is a lot harder than I thought, Chris.
You are listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 78 for February 17th, 2016. I'm your host, Chris Webster. On today's show, Bill and Ashley Morton talk about their experiences at the Society for Historical Archaeology meetings last month in Washington, D.C. Following that discussion is a recording Bill made at the SHAs. So, go register for your regional conferences and, of course, for the SAAs, because the CRM Archaeology Podcast starts right now.
Hello, welcome to the podcast. My name is Bill White, and I'm here with Ashley Morton, here to give you a little bit of information, a little lowdown on the Society for Historical Archaeology conference that just happened last month in Washington, D.C. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about maybe some of the things that I saw, interpretations of the conference, and then discuss the equity issues panel that Ashley and I were both on. So I guess I'll give Ashley a few minutes. What did you think about Washington, D.C., the conference, and how it all went?
I think it was a really good conference. The space was kind of interesting. I sort of felt like it was this cavernous conference area where usually you bump into everybody you see, and I know there were people there that I literally never saw. I don't know, did you feel the same way? I just felt it was this pretty massive cavernous conference space. It was great, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it wasn't really like the size of it as it was like the way that the rooms were all in different areas, And it's crazy because it's a group of 1,000 PhDs who every time I saw everyone didn't seem to know what room they were supposed to go into. So I can't really blame the SHA. I learned a while ago that we have these complaints about like venue and stuff like that, but it's really the people who live in that area, the society members that are from that location, that really put everything together for the society. So like if you ever have any complaints, it's not really the fault of the society. And then also, if you have any complaints, then you need to step up and plan it in your hometown. So since I guess I'm not willing to schedule one here in Tucson anytime soon, I guess I just take what I can get. But I agree with you
Well,
about
I wasn't trying to
being.
really complain too much about it. I just was really no I really felt it, I think, this conference time around, and I've been consistently going for 7 years or something, and it just seemed really striking. This At this conference venue, to not bump into so many people, so maybe it was just so well spread out for once. I don't know. I'm not really complaining about it. I just really felt that this year.
Yeah, no, it was a really beautiful place, the Omni Shoreham.
Yeah.
And had I been from back east, I would have enjoyed the weather because it was like, I guess, warm for the Easterners. But coming from Tucson, it was another opportunity to wear my down parka. So I was like, yeah, it's in the 60s. Better put on all my North Face everything, my rain gear, snow boots. Like, let's do it. It's in the 60s. But the place was totally beautiful, and there was an awesome neighborhood nearby with a lot of different restaurants, and actually, it was one of the better venues I've been to.
Hmm. Yeah, because you were able to really get to the metro and check out other parts of the city, like in other years. Some of the venues have been a little bit more isolating, so I think they did a really good job in choosing the location in the city, so you could just have an opportunity to really explore. So I got to it. Speaking of that, I don't normally attend the public event that the society does every conference, but since being a part of Project Archaeology, which is a uh, nationwide archaeology curriculum organization that's led by the BLM, I've been doing a lot more public archaeology related stuff and actually trying to be a bit more active in seeking out these kinds of venues, I went to the Society's public event, which was held at the African American Civil War Museum. And that was really cool. I saw a lot of great booths, and a friend of ours, we were just talking about Dr. Alexander Jones with Archaeology in the Community had a really great booth, and it was really cool to see that museum. So I think I'm going to really try and make a effort more in the years to come to see more of the public event stuff that the society has going on. So I really, really like that a lot.
Yeah, I heard that it was awesome, and I wanted to go, but my talk was actually at the same time as that event.
I
Um,
know, I know. I just
yeah,
missed your talk because of it. Because it was
well,
like, oh, I gotta go to this. So yeah.
I was gonna say you can see an amazing museum, or you can just listen to me talk some more. I mean, I don't think you missed anything. 15 minutes of me talking. Yeah, you guys, you all know how that goes. Uh, the one thing about the conference overall, the thing that so each year it seems like there's this subliminal theme that I've noticed. There's at least for the terrestrial stuff, because the SHA is also the Underwater Archaeology Association conference too. So I'd say probably 40%, maybe even half of all the symposia are about underwater archaeology. But I've noticed over the years that sometimes there's these themes where you see more than one symposium on the same topic. And it seemed like 2016 public archaeology was just like there was, maybe 4 or 5 symposia, good ones too, on public archaeology. And so I don't know if that's an indicator that we're doing more public archaeology, or if everybody ended up somehow falling in those kind of those talks. But it seemed like there was a lot more public archaeology presence, and then also the fact that we were in Washington D.C. and the National Park Service had great representation. you know, um, they had an awesome booth in the book room. They gave talks. I didn't actually get to see very many of their talks, but I know that several of them were about youth projects, getting teenagers involved with public archaeology and just archaeology in general. And so I really wish that I'd seen more of those talks, but it seems like the Park Service is really actually kind of taking the lead on this whole public archaeology thing. And it was great to see their just them show up to the conference and really tell us all what they've all been doing. So I thought that was really great. I appreciated it. So another thing that I was able to be, actually, Ashley and I, both of us, were on the equity issues panel. So Ashley, maybe you can explain a little bit more about the panel and maybe how it came about and what our conversation this year was on.
Yeah, so this was the fourth year that myself and Lewis Jones, who's a PhD candidate with Indiana University, we have co-led this panel, and Bill has been on it for a couple years now as well as a panelist. It came about a couple years ago with Lewis and I having conversations about just challenges that we've both been facing in our careers, working our way up. He in academia largely, and myself in CRM. And so basically, we felt, whereas I was feeling maybe there was more gendered issues, he was helping me realize really a lot of this stuff is everybody issues. And so let's talk about that. So this year we tried to focus more on glass ceilings after a lot of great conversations coming out of the I believe the IFA, International for Archaeologists conference. I think I might be chopping that up, but that's the one in the UK, where a lot of folks were talking about glass ceilings that they had encountered, a lot of parenting issues, as well as um, just workplace climate problems. And we had a really great, strong conversation about each of those kinds of aspects that our panelists had interacted with. Our panelists this year were Mandy Ranslow, who is a Department of Transportation archaeologist with Connecticut. Alexandra Jones with Archaeology in the Community. She's it's a nonprofit organization that helps provide public archaeology outreach to children. She's their executive director. We did have on the roster, but she could not attend, was Barbara Little, who is a amazing National Park Service archaeologist. And then Bill, myself, and Lewis Jones.
So the thing that I thought, going back to the glass ceilings topic, there was someone in the audience who talked about how maybe they might have lost their job because they had a kid. And being a parent, that's the kind of stuff that's just like, it actually makes me pretty frustrated that that kind of stuff is happening. And you know, in the discussion, there was no way we could tell if she had actually lost her job because she became a mom. So the company had followed all the right protocols. They had made sure that they gave her maternity and that she had had opportunities to work and everything. But as soon as she got as soon as she got pregnant or had the child, all of a sudden her annual reviews got poor. She was getting maybe not so great marks on her work, the same quality of work that had been happening before, and then she she got laid off for the season, whereas she had never actually been laid off before. So it was like, the company actually did nothing wrong. However, a person who had worked for years for the same company magically was, fired or basically laid off, and it all coincided with her becoming a mom. That stuff is like devastating to people who want to have a career in cultural resources. It's so crazy writing several blog posts about this. um, I've gotten emails from folks talking about how they're having troubles or how they're like hiding their pregnancy from their employer because they don't want their boss to know that they're pregnant, and like they don't really know what to do. And I'm kind of shaking my head like, on the one hand, I'd love to believe that, you know, uh, this person is just worried about nothing and they could tell their employer, I'm pregnant, I'm going to have a baby, and I still really want to work here, but I'm going to be a mom too. And then that the company would be really receptive to that and happy for this person. But, after having done cultural resources and seeing different levels of this kind of like discrimination against mothers, I know that I can't really give them that kind of advice and say, well, you need to tell it to your employer because it's dangerous for you to be out in the field, because that's actually the truth. However, if they do disclose that to their employer, there's a strong chance they're going to, be kept from the field, even if they have someone to take care of the child, even if they're early term pregnancy and there's, not any hazards or whatever. I mean, I really don't know what to say. And it's not just in cultural resources. I see archaeologists that are professors, waiting to get tenure or waiting to get in a position where they've got a permanent job as an instructor before they even try to have a kid. And so folks are, close to 40 years old before they're having children because they were afraid that their employer would fire them unless they were a tenured professor or unless they were a principal investigator before they had kids. I mean, I can go on and on for a while, but what do you think, Ashley?
Well, I think, there is a lot of, I don't know if it's pressure per se, but I know personally, I see that it would be easier for me career wise to hold off on starting a family until things are a little bit more solid for me. Although I'm in a pretty, I think, solid place and I'm already a PI and stuff, but it's just going to be a conversation that has to happen more frequently to help everybody out that they, we can change the culture of that. That's not everybody's experience. I certainly have worked with women who were well into probably their second trimester, who knows, maybe even into their early third trimester. And, we were working in the field, and we just made sure that like they were comfortable and they were communicating when, they needed to take breaks. And I think there's a concern that we don't want to overly emphasize that women can't be in the field that are pregnant. I think there's a obviously a safety concern, but I think what happens is that employers think as soon as you're pregnant, you're not able to perform in the field anymore. And while there might be positions in the office, and like she was even saying that she had actually not even been in the field for like a good year or so, and suddenly she got pregnant, or shared her pregnancy with the employer, and she needed to be in the field. I think that was what she was talking about. And so I think it's probably communication on all sides, like communicating not just the safety, but you know, um, the education. Like, at what point is it really, you know, not safe for pregnant women to be surveying or to be excavating? And so I think, yeah, it's going to be a conversation that needs to con- continue on. But I think uh, it is something that needs to definitely be made better. None of us, whether you're a new dad or a new mom, should feel, I don't know, this pressure to, not enjoy parenthood, and be an archaeologist.
Yeah, I think one of the things either I thought of or that it came around in the conversation was that the business structure and our expectations in cultural resources were based on like 1950s social norms, and we thought that we're these like advanced progressive individuals, but basically we're still sticking to that same line of men in the field, women in the field, as long as they don't have to do any of the women's work, basically like taking care of kids and all that stuff. And this conversation brought it out. It really brought it to the fore. But then I know I didn't say anything there, and I should have. But the real solution to this is going paperless, because you don't actually, in fact, have to be in the field to do part of the work. I mean, if you're a skilled tech that knows what they're doing out there in the field, or if you're, a crew chief or whatever that knows what they're doing, there's no reason you can't be doing the QA and the quality control on the field work if that stuff's coming in wirelessly. I mean, there's no reason why you can't do that kind of work at home, in the maternity ward, like wherever you're at. I mean, I just immediately thought, oh, well, paperless, if it was all digital stuff, there'd be plenty of work for these people to do, these ladies to do while they're taking care of a little baby. And then to
Well,
me,
how
like,
they're doing it in the
oh,
maternity ward.
wait,
They're
what
like,
is it? The
while you're giving birth, do this paperwork for me.
what's messed up? I was thinking about like that the man could be doing it while they're in the maternity ward, because there's a
No,
lot of time sitting there and there's only so many channels of cable. And Judge Judy's only funny like the first time every 5 years. And so while you're sitting there and the baby's asleep and she's asleep, like, yeah, QA some stuff. But yeah, I guess maybe that's my own
not
self.
not in the maternity ward. Well, but I think there's a
Yeah,
deeper,
not in the maternity ward. You're right. Even if you are the man, like seriously, chill out for like
like, like,
24
yeah,
straight hours.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
but you experienced that yourself, Bill, where there was this expectation for you to, um, it was like, okay, yes, we understand being like at the birth of your child is important, but there was this like idea that you would come back to work right away, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like, you just tell your employer and they're happy. All right, cool. You're going to be a dad. That's great. I remember when my kids were born, and then a few months later you come back and say, "Oh, by the way, is there any paternity at this company?" And then, the companies I worked for, they were just kind of like, what, are you kidding me? Paternity? What's paternity? And then I was like, okay, well, then I understand I can use FMLA because having a child is an emergency, a medical emergency. So I'm going to just take, 90 days of FMLA. And they're just kind of like staring at me like a deer in the headlights, like, wait a minute. So let me get this straight. You're going to just take no money and stay at home for 90 days because you had a kid? And I was just kind of like, yeah, man, those first 6 months, like somebody's got to be there. One of the parents have got to be there. Well, doesn't your
Yeah.
wife have
Well,
maternity? And it's kind of like, yeah, she does have maternity, but I'm a dad and I also want to be there too. So it was
yeah.
like a weird conversation. And by taking FMLA, you can't get fired. However, I could see where they could retaliate the same way and be like, okay, well, then you're out in the field for the next 6 months. I don't care. You've been sitting around all day.
Yeah, so I think we're talking about, really trying to change that attitude. That I think there's these bad and good experiences of parenthood in the workplace as an archaeologist, goes to a deeper issue of really how employers treat their employees and how they view their employees as assets or burdens, or as merely uh, replaceable. So I think that was something that we got to talk about a little bit too on this panel as well, is just the attitudes of employers, um, and how they manifested in these kinds of glass ceilings. So I thought it was a really great conversation. One of my favorite things about this conversation was also some of the positive things to come
Yeah.
out of it. Talking about confidence, how each of the panelists have cultivated confidence, because we all need to feel that way, feel strong, and stand up for ourselves, whether it's and to talk to an engineer, to talk to a client, or to talk to your boss, that kind of a thing. And so there was a lot of really great positivity from this panel, that has certainly inspired Lewis and I to really take this, we want to take this further, and we want to see if we can do a workshop with SHA or something. Both Lewis and I also sit on the Gender and Minorities Affairs Committee, where the committee is right now very active in anti-racism training. And so we're hoping to try and, pull from all those areas. So yeah, those were kind of my final thoughts about the panel. Bill, did you have any?
No, I agree. It's like you said before. I think this is the third time I've been on the panel, and each time I come away, feeling like I've really spent some time thinking about these issues that don't really come up very often. So it was fruitful. It's always fruitful to be on the panel. Are you doing it next year?
Well,
You were only supposed to do it 4 times, right? And now you're going to
well,
be going.
Lewis and I had actually wanted to do it for 5 years, but we'll have to see. So stay tuned,
All
folks.
right. Cool. Well, I'll be on there too. Okay, so the SHA 2016 coverage continues after this break with a short discussion about the Society of Black Archaeologists and some of the exciting stuff that's going on in that group of historical archaeologists.
All these things we make no apology are the study of archaeology. But we don't do dinosaurs.
Did aliens build Stonehenge? Did the Easter Island statues walk? Did the Vikings colonize Midwest America? What does mainstream archaeology have to say about all of this? Listen to the Archaeological Fantasies podcast and learn about popular archaeological mysteries. Hoax or fact? Learn to tell the difference with Dr. Kenneth Fader and co-host Sarah of the Archae Fantasies blog. Check out the show on iTunes and Stitcher Radio and at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/Archae Fantasies and get ready to think critically. Let's get back to the show.
Funny beady blokes you will see are a staple of archaeology.
My name is Bill White, and we're recording here at the Society for Historical Archaeology Conference in Washington, D.C., and I'm here with the two founders of the Society for Black Archaeologists. So, can you guys introduce yourselves and tell me a little bit more?
Hi, I'm Ayanna Fluellen. I'm a graduate student at the University of Texas at Austin.
And I'm Justin Dunavant. I'm a graduate student at the University of Florida in Gainesville.
Right on. So, tell me a little bit more about the Society for Black Archaeologists, that is.
You want to talk about how it started, Ayanna?
Yes, one correction, Society of Black Archaeologists for the African diaspora. So it's a distinct difference that Justin made clear, I think, back in 2012. The actual sort of foundations of it was, I guess, a really interesting story. We were driving back from a Black psychology conference that was held at FAMU, which is a historically Black college university in Florida. And that space was really powerful, really influential in the ways in which Black people and African diasporic people came together in that discipline to have conversations about the ways in which they approach their research. And Justin and I really were searching for something like that in our own discipline in archaeology, where you have a historically white sort of space. So we kind of hashed it out on the drive back down, and we came up with core principles and a sort of grounding foundation.
Yeah, and I think it was what influenced us most about the conference was it wasn't a traditional conference in the sense of you had different sessions, different papers. It was more of a collective organizational meeting. So there was only one room where you met in, and all the sessions were in that one room.
Wow.
And it was this big auditorium, and they were grappling with issues like, okay, this is one of the current issues going on for people of African descent right now. How are we as psychologists dealing with X, Y, and Z? And they had people that were actually talking about this is how we're dealing with it. And they had prepped a year in advance, some months in advance. And then also every year they dedicated to a different Black psychologist. So there would be one panel theme about that professor, that psychologist's work, and then people who knew them on a personal level talking about our experience with, so they can get background context. So we liked that model, and we said, let's see if we can hash out some things. And we were in the car ride, we organized it, and then we said, okay, what are we going to name it? And we were thinking Association of Black Archaeologists. And then we're like, but the abbreviation is ABA, and there's an Association of Black Anthropologists, so we got to change the name. And I was reading a book by Asa Hilliard called the Warrior Within, or Reawakening of the African Mind, I think it was. And the official title is Sabah, SBA, from the Kemetic word. And so we're like, SBA, Society of Black Archaeologists. SBA. And so it's got that kind of hidden, people don't really know the background on that part. But that's why we chose SBA as opposed to ABA or SAB or anything.
Got it. So then it's like a freestanding organization. It's not associated with your universities?
No, it's really a collective. So, and we sort of grappled initially back and forth, especially with both of us being so heavily involved in SHA, if we wanted to somehow have it housed within a particular organization, be it SBA, be it SHA, or be it under ABA, like a part of the AAA sort of thing. But we really wanted it to be a space that wasn't held to any sort of constraints of an organization.
Yeah, and we actually started out creating a listserv where we stalked on the internet every Black archaeologist we know, created a database of their contact information, and then blasted out an email saying, hey, we're creating this network of Black archaeologists. We know that you all are Black archaeologists. Do you know any other archaeologists? And we got replies from different people saying, oh yeah, this person isn't on the list, that person isn't on the list.
Yeah.
And from that, we grew the listserv. And we said, we'll start at least with a conversation of a listserv. And we didn't want to get bogged down by finances and having to hire somebody to handle the finances, creating a bank account, or president, vice president, none of that. Just start outside of the listserv so it's not intimidating.
Right on. And so it seems like each year you guys are having a meeting here at the Society for Historical Archaeology conference. Do you also do it at the SAA too? American Archaeology?
We haven't. I've actually never been to SAA yet.
The first meeting that we had, and once again, I think it's because Justin and I have just attended SHA, and we're more heavily involved in this organization. But even while at SHA, we were having conversations with other Black archaeologists as to different conference spaces that they attend. And a lot of them who do historical archaeology, archaeology or archaeology focused on the African diaspora, be it historical or prehistoric, aren't attending the SAAs, and they aren't attending the AAAs as well. This seems to be a hub space for that work to be highlighted. So where we would like in the future to branch off into these other spaces, also being very cognizant of the current space in which a lot of us are occupying, it's here at the SHA.
Yeah, exactly. And, I've noticed that too. I actually have stopped going to the SAA most of the time. There's almost never anything I'm interested in the whole time that I'm there. And also, just it doesn't really seem like it is that inclusive to historical archaeology.
Yeah.
They do things like schedule all the historical archaeology talks at the same time so that we just all get them out of the way. But then there's nothing for us for the rest of the time. So the only way I go to the SAA is if I'm invited or asked or I'm trying to help somebody out.
Yeah.
But I've been to it several times, and you guys, it seems like you made the right decision to focus on historical archaeology. The only bad thing is as it grows here, more Black people just stay in historical archaeology, and then we're missing a chance to expand in I guess the Society for American Archaeology is supposed to be inclusive of all kinds of archaeology, but really it's prehistoric. And so any Black folks that are working in prehistoric archaeology are not usually coming to this one.
Yeah, I guess the catch-22 about that is we've only really encountered maybe 2 or 3 people that
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So talking about growing the listserv, I have noticed, I've been on the list for a few years, it's growing.
Yes.
So tell us more about that.
Part of the initial impetus to grow it was creating a website.
Yeah.
And none of us had web design background. So we got a Weebly account. Everything was already formatted for us. And
wonderful interface.
Right. And we drag and dropped everything just to have something that people could search.
Yeah.
And it would come up in a search. And honestly, that searching ability is probably the most significant thing that has helped to grow the network. And we get emails from people all the time saying, I was just looking for a Black archaeologist. I Googled it. I found your organization. Can you tell me a little bit more? Our Facebook page has grown exponentially.
Yeah.
We have like over 1,500 followers on Facebook, which is huge because I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure they're all real people, to be honest with you.
You're not supposed to accept from strangers.
Right. But I think that helped. In addition to getting that out, people have been soliciting us from different organizations and universities that are trying to hire more diverse pools of archaeologists.
Yeah.
And they realize that when they just put out the general call, it's not as diverse as they need it to be. So they reach out to us and say, will you promote this? And so as a result of that, our listserv has grown because people have been seeing that we're posting job announcements on a regular basis. And people who solicit us then join the organization. And we're, of course, inclusive to everybody as well. So.
Yeah, that was another question I wanted to ask. It's open to anyone, right?
Yes. And it something else, I guess, about the sort of history of the organization is that, be it that both of us are from the University of Florida. Justin was a graduate student while I was an undergraduate there from 2008 to 2011, and we both worked closely with Faye Harrison while she was there as well. And she's one of the seminal sort of figures in the Association for Black Anthropologists. So
Yeah.
she was a real mentor that we really sat down with, trying to figure out how we wanted to sort of organize SBA initially as well. And one of the, I remember one of our conversations were about the sort of membership that comes at the ABA organization, where it's also very much diverse. And what keeps it together are the sort of core values of that organization, which is to help the African diaspora community through anthropological research. And the same thing goes for SBA as well. So you can be a Black archaeologist, or you can be outside of that identification, as long as you, in your research and how you go about your scholarship, really caters towards not your own personal goals, but the African diaspora community at large.
And what we have always advocated is, as long as you are interested in working towards our core principles of what the organization is about, we fully hope that you will join the organization. You know, and part of it is trying to increase the amount of archaeologists of color through mentorship and so forth, trying to help advocate for the proper heritage and ethical conservation of African diaspora and African remains, those sorts of things. And of course, that doesn't require skin color. That just requires somebody dedicated to it in that church.
Yes.
And we hope that this will be an impetus then for other organizations to form, maybe a Society of Hispanic Archaeologists, whatever it needs to be. Yeah. Or maybe at the end of the day, we'll have a huge Society of Archaeologists of Color. Or
I think we were talking about this last night, about what I've seen as far as expansion of more Native Americans and cultural resources. And there is a real drive, at least in the Western United States, for more tribes to actually, not only take over their own obligations for protecting archaeological sites within their culture area, but also training individuals so that they can actually have the skills required to keep doing that into the future. I guess, the tribal historic preservation offices might one day become basically cultural resource managers for all their own stuff, and they won't have to contract it out.
Right. That's the goals.
So it sounds like the SBA is more of kind of like a mastermind group in a lot of ways, that it doesn't really have formal meetings or president and a hierarchy and presentations. It's just like people sharing thoughts and helping each other. So it's like a networking tool. So how do you think that articulates with more formal organizations like the Society for Historical Archaeology?
I personally think it's a wonderful thing because we can have informal meetings and we can grow and expand as much as we need to. We can get together with 3 members and come across a decision, put it out on a listserv and say, this is what the organization wants to do. Are there any comments? Most times we don't really get too many comments, and if we do, the membership is constructive and saying you should add this or take out that. We adhere to it and we can send out something real quick. We don't have to go through the bureaucracy of, well, what does the board think? And what does this organization think?
Yeah.
What's the time frame coming back? We don't have to worry about all of that. So.
Going back to the free form.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to add in terms of the collaboration opportunities, because we don't have that structure, as Justin mentioned, we don't have to go through that bureaucracy. We're able to really create bridges with smaller organizations as well that might not necessarily have access to these sort of larger forums. Like community members, different spaces that reach out to us that don't necessarily have the knowledge of maybe SHA, but know they want to do some sort of preservation work and come across our page. It's been a really sort of great opportunity for that work.
And it can be cumbersome if I'm a member of 10 different organizations. Yeah. And many people have asked, what do I need to do to become a member? And I think if we had a formal membership process, it would weed out a lot of people that could potentially add to the organization. So we just said, just let us know. We'll put you on the listserv. If you have any comments. When we send out our email, we say, please let us know if there's anything we can do to assist you.
Yeah.
And then continue from there.
Yeah, it seems like it's truly, at least my experience, has been more of a sharing and collaboration tool. That what's great is that it doesn't have I'll continue in a second. As far as my experience, it seems to me like the SBA is more of creation and a collaboration tool where you share ideas and you get to connect with individuals who are doing things in other areas, and you can also share what you know, no matter how much or how little. And all the while, because it's online, everyone's hearing the conversation. It's just all happening at the same time, and you can pop in and you can add comments or take ideas and then apply them later and come back after you've used that. And I think that's the most functional aspect of me being a member. So I get to hear things that I wouldn't otherwise, hear. Especially working out west, you don't have a lot of black sites, so you see what's going on in other areas. Maybe you can apply that to other kinds of archaeological sites.
And for us, dealing with coordinating, it's been eye-opening for a lot of us because I had no experience in Park Service, but then we get emails from people that work in the Park Service saying, hey, we need assistance with this, or I'm going through certain experiences as an African American dealing in this area, and I'm not sure how to move forward. Can you guys offer some advice? So in that sense, it's been a way for us to get a better gauge of what's going on in terms of the state of Black archaeology.
Yeah, and as being young, we're all starting off on our career. Do you find that it's really easy to find mentors and connect with people through this?
Yeah, I think that's been one of the most sort of beautiful outcomes of this organization are the networks that come out of it and the people that you meet and the conversations that you have, especially with the Oral History Project that Justin and I started with the foundation of this organization as well, just having a space where we collect our own experiences and document our own histories within this organization. Being able to have those conversations with people and seeing where their research is, how they're approaching it, has been influential, like beyond measure.
And I think one of the most beautiful things as well is the fact that when we mentioned that we wanted to start this collective organization, there were older archaeologists that came out and said, I'm so glad you all are doing this. We had wanted to do this 10 years ago. There just simply weren't enough people to get it going.
Yeah.
And so with that said, they've been very helpful in terms of let me know if you need anything. If somebody sends us a query and we can't answer it, we forward it off to them and they get back to them very quickly. So it's been powerful in that sense too.
You briefly mentioned the Oral History Project. Can you tell me more about that?
So Justin and I have really close connections and ties with oral history. We both worked with, and Justin still does, the Samuel Proctor Oral History program at the University of Florida. So oral history has always been instrumental. But for us in particular, especially with me coming from like a Black Studies foundation and also piggybacking back off of my earlier comment towards Faye Harrison and ABA and her work that documents the early Black pioneers within anthropology, knowing that as Black scholars, we have to document our own histories or they won't be told, which was also a sort of reoccurring comment that came up in Justin's panel yesterday that focused on Black lives and what that sort of liberation movement means within archaeology, that we have to document our own presence in this space. We have to document our own intellectual genealogies that we bring to this space. We have to be the ones that articulate that, or it won't be said, it'll be lost. So that's really been the premise of the Oral History Project, is having a space that not only highlights personal experiences as people of the African diaspora in this space, but also having very concrete conversations about what we bring and what our standpoint is and what that brings to our intellectual scholarship.
And it was really important for us as well because when we got into the discipline, of course you want to know like who are the founding fathers of archaeology. So we learned the typical canon. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, well, who were some of the first Black archaeologists? There's nothing.
There's like no...
There's no formal documentation as to, who was the first Black archaeologist.
And even in Faye's book, even in Dr. Harrison's text, there are no Black archeologists mentioned.
Yeah.
So who is the first? Did you guys ever figure out who is the first Black archaeologist?
So the rumor is Warren Barber was the first Black archaeologist, not first Black archaeologist, So this is also where it gets a little tricky. As to how do you define a black archaeologist?
Formally trained.
Yeah,
Did
the
you
first
say that?
with a PhD.
Okay.
He was the first. Teresa Singleton was the first African-American woman to get a PhD in archaeology.
Okay.
I recently wrote a paper on William Leo Hansberry, who had a master's in anthropology from Harvard, and he was doing archaeological work throughout the
Classics, right?
Africa, yeah, focusing mainly on Ethiopia.
Oh, really?
That area. Mm-hmm.
And when was that?
He was working. He started in the 20s and was working up until the 50s. However, John Wesley Gilbert is often noted as the first black archaeologist. He never received a formal degree. He received a bachelor's degree. And he did a site in, I want to say it was Greece.
Yeah.
And wrote a report on it. However, he also became an ordained minister and a missionary and went that route and ended up writing a book. It's like almost like a travel log, his travels throughout the Congo.
Crazy.
And that was like late 19th century.
Crazy.
So it all depends on how you define it. And then some people we could go back to, well, the first black archaeologists were the enslaved Africans that worked on the excavations.
For Thomas Jefferson, yeah.
Exactly.
That's what I was going to say. And then I thought maybe the 1930s, all the people who worked for the CCC doing sites in the Southeast, I thought maybe you guys would say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, rich heritage that we don't even know anything about.
Definitely. And so I think that we're hoping that this type of work will then create the impetus to do further archival research and possibly get some publications out there so people can actually read about, this is what's going on.
But until the publications come out, something that's been really nice is having access to resources that the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program provides, but then also the interviews thus far are all online. So people can listen to them. I think a couple of them are also transcribed as well. So it also provides others who are doing research the opportunity to have access to what we.
And a major part of it is using those oral histories to better forward the goals of the organization. So trying to understand what is it that attracts people of African descent into archaeology, what is it that maintains their retention into the discipline, what hang-ups did they have, and once we outline those, they say what's measured can be managed. So once we can measure what it is that is successful and create a model for success, we can then move on to say, okay, we need a mentorship program, we need to have field school opportunities where they feel comfortable and where they're fostering this idea of learning. And we need to have people in CRM, give them CRM experience, because we find they want to go into CRM and not necessarily do a PhD, or do a PhD and go into CRM. So,
yeah, I think that might be the next step. So, I think I started going to the SHA in 2002, and it was like, there was maybe 4 or 5 black people there. And I don't think the society has grown much in that time. I don't see where it's like much larger. Like the SAA I see in the last 10 years is bigger. It seems way bigger than it was, 10 years ago. But the Historical Archaeology Society has maintained, it seems like, about the same size. But it does seem like there are more, there's more minorities, but definitely I see more African Americans. However, in archaeology, like outside of here, pulling in a paycheck doing archaeology and cultural resources, I still don't see hardly any black people in CRM. So, as far as the SBA goes, how can we get more black archaeologists and cultural resources?
I think part of that incentive lies with the CRM firms in terms of reaching out and saying, we clearly see that there's not enough archaeologists who come in CRM, and we want to increase that. How can we increase that? The reason why you have an increase in African American archaeologists in academia is because you have professors in academia that are reaching out to students of color saying, we need you to join, we'd like you to get interested. Now, with that said, I don't want to put all the pressure on the CRM firms, because I feel as though, with partnership is what it's going to take between organizations, CRM, and trying to identify individuals as to the opportunities. Still, for many people in academia, CRM is almost seen as, if you don't want to get a PhD, go into CRM. It's almost like a dirty word, which I still don't really understand. But I think there's part of that breaking down of myths that needs to occur as well.
And as far as working in CRM, I do know that it's the person that knows the right individuals who are hiring and has the right experience that gets hired like almost every time. So sometimes they'll need a lot of field text for a project and they almost don't care who the person is because they figure they just need bodies to do the work. But those massive projects like that are getting more and more rare. So CRM, as far as the total number of dollars that's coming in, is growing overall, but in the percentage of money that goes to cultural resources firms, it just dwarfs. Like I saw a statistic that said there was about $22 million in archaeology, grant-funded archaeology in the United States, and there was like $806 million or $860 million in CRM money that got, that was spent on archaeology. And so the amount of money that you have in cultural resources just, dwarfs everything else that you would do with grants. However, I mean, you need to, as an up-and-coming archaeologist, black, white, whatever, you have to get the experience and then meet all the right people. And I don't see so much anymore, at least out west, where maybe white archaeologists don't want to hire they don't want to hire Native American, they don't want to hire this person. They want to hire whoever can actually do the job that they know personally.
Right.
So the key for, what I would see the SBA, the next step should be to link up with all these other cultural resources groups so that all the SBA members are handshaking friends with everyone who hires all the, archaeologists. So it just all moves into a steady pattern. But then also training. So you were saying field school. Is there anything else SBA's doing to maybe train folks to move to the next level? I mean, you guys are just starting. I'm not putting you on. What's in your mind? What's the pie in the sky? What do you dream of it doing?
I mean,
as far as training,
definitely just before we get to training, in terms of going back to your initial comment, I think even looking at the sort of job opportunities that have been reached out, that come through us, a lot of them have been academic jobs as well. So definitely putting it out there that this is also a space if CRM firms were looking to get their job announcements to people of color, their organizations.
And it's free to post a job post. Okay.
It's absolutely free, and it goes up on our website. It goes up on our Facebook page. We send it out through our listserv as well from time to time. Yeah, so I mean, it's an access point that's definitely there. And with that being said, I don't think we've had any CRM firms contact.
We have had a few contacts.
We've had a few contacts, but for a large part of our job announcements have come from the academic side as well. But as far as training goes, just as we get in job announcements, we get in opportunities for field schools as well that we post on our webpage in the same sort of regard. So that definitely does occur. And even through our oral history project, we've come across the really sort of concrete understanding that not only is field school experience seminal, but it's also really difficult in terms of financially for not only just Black, but people of color and people of a certain economic class to have access to, regardless of your racial designation or affiliation. So training is definitely an aspect of it, but that's also in conversation with all these other sort of isms that come into place as well.
And we're currently in the works on putting together a project, working with the Association of Black Scuba Divers.
Yeah, I heard about that. Maybe you should.
In terms of maritime, I won't talk too much about it because it's still in the
right.
early phases.
All right.
But I would say
exciting.
if you have time, definitely check out the Diving with a Purpose and the Association of Black Scuba Divers. They've done some amazing work in terms of mapping shipwrecks related to the Atlantic slave trade, and they've mapped Tuskegee Airmen airplanes that have gone down in Michigan. A lot of powerful stuff, and they're looking to train more students of color in archaeology, and specifically underwater archaeology, because as far as we know, there are 0 underwater archaeologists.
Yeah.
And they've mentioned that they couldn't find any. And they reached out to us because they were sitting on a boat in Mozambique having an argument with each other about whether or not there was a black archaeologist. And they Googled black archaeology and came up with the website and contacted us. And
Wow.
That's how we got a conversation with them. So
Yeah.
Crazy.
yeah.
So wait, so they're saying there's no black underwater archaeologists?
They have not been, well, black in terms of African American in the U.S.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
they said there's more. There are several African trained.
African, yeah.
Residing in Africa. Yeah.
Yeah.
And probably some Caribbean, but I can't, don't quote me on that one.
All right.
And something that they've come across is that even with finding and linking up with like the black divers, that it's difficult to find those who are black divers who are interested in archaeology versus finding an archaeologist
who can just learn how to dive.
And who already has that sort of interest in that research and just is looking for a different avenue.
It's a lot more work to create an archaeologist than a diver, you know.
Right.
Yeah,
Like on vacation, there's learn how to dive in an hour, you know.
Yeah.
You aren't gonna learn how to do archaeology in an hour.
Yeah. But we're linking up expertise because the Association of Black Scuba Divers has formalized programs both in K through 12 and for
awesome.
other researchers in order to get you certified through a quick program. And they do dive-in trips on a regular basis where you go off with them for 2 weeks to another country, and the amount of diving hours that you put in is enough to be certified. So
you guys are obviously
so excited.
You guys are doing it, right? You're gonna be the first.
well, I don't.
First two.
We're gonna try.
You gonna do it?
If we can pull as many people in as possible, and the idea is even if all of us at the end of the day we all learn how to dive, but 2 or 3 of us go into it, at least we got 2 or 3 people in there, and we can all swim now at the end of the day.
Right on. Well, you got to do it. Somebody's got to do it. You're in the perfect place. There's too much water for diving for me. Yeah, I don't really like going out in the ocean or deep water. It's like, just put your toes in, that's good.
Yeah. But one thing I found is that conversation then, from those conversations, we've already started, I'm not going to get too into it, but we've already started talking about creating projects that can link terrestrial with maritime.
Wow.
As one project.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways that can happen.
Even blending that with oral history.
Definitely, and blending
as
it
well.
Oh yeah.
So many avenues and possibilities to have really holistic projects.
Mm-hmm.
Because just as they're trying to train more maritime, again, we also are trying to train more archaeologists generally.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found through the interviews is that when you find other people of color on the site with you, that makes a huge difference in terms of how comfortable you feel with the work that you're doing and the things you uncover, and that idea of building that cohesive network and that group together.
All right, one last question. International. So, going out and going beyond. Since you don't have like a geographic area, it's not like it's not like the SBA is the archaeology of the central United States or the Great Basin or something like that, right? A lot of the formal organizations, they do have a geographic region, or for the historical archaeology, it's a temporal thing, right? Mm-hmm. So hypothetically, the SBA could just be African American or just black archaeologists that do archaeology. They don't have to do historical, or it's like underwater. It can be any era. So that opens up the organization to the whole world.
Yeah.
So are you guys going beyond and finding black folks in other places? Is there
definitely
connecting with folks in Africa? Definitely, but
throughout the
beyond
Caribbean as well. Justin's made a lot of contacts through just the work that he's done in those spaces. So initially, the listserv, I think, began as just African descendant people in the U.S. or the sort of North American context, but definitely we now have members who are all over the world in terms of looking at work being done by those who are black in the Caribbean, by those who are identified as black on the continent as well.
And being one of the few archaeologists of color that works in Africa, I've noticed that this conversation is very much needed on the continent. At the same time, it's also been happening for a while.
Yeah.
So we've interviewed, if you go back to one of our oral history interviews, we interviewed Dr. Georgia Bungu, who was very instrumental in setting up museums in Kenya. And he was mentioning some of the same struggles that he was having as an African graduate student at Cambridge University when he was coming through. Mm-hmm. And I think because we're then able to tap into that, we draw in students of African descent, specifically from Africa, that may be interested in it. and they see themselves in this position. The one hang-up that we have had, I would say, is when you throw the label Black on anything, people get scared or hesitant as to what is it going to be. And so as a result of that, especially if you're a young scholar coming through and you're trying to branch out and maybe attain for a Cambridge or an Amherst, you think, well, if I throw my label Black, am I marginalizing myself in the organization? So as a result of that, we understand that that's a real fear of people. But again, our listserv is probably 30, 40% non-African descent in terms of how it operates and how it works. And it's becoming more comfortable, but we realize that people may not feel as comfortable. So we just put them on the list anyway, and if they get an email from us, they get an email from us. If they tell us to stop, we'll stop.
And I think this recording actually is going to go a long way towards telling people about that you don't have to be Black to be interested in, diaspora archaeology or just what Africans or African Americans are doing. You can join organizations and you don't have to be Black, and you don't have to be afraid of being in a Black organization.
Right. And we've gotten emails about, isn't it racist because there's no Society of White Archaeologists? And we've had to have those discussions with people, but we try not to let it drain our intellectual.
I mean, especially with the, I think the last time that we did a poster session was it 2 years? It wasn't in Quebec. It was before that.
It was SHA in Quebec. We had a poster session.
It was Quebec. I thought it was Baltimore.
No.
Okay, it was Quebec. Substantial less Black archaeologists go to these, go to SHA when it's international, even if it is just Canada. But Justin and I did a poster presentation just on the initial sort of interviews that we had collected. And not only did we get questions as to whether or not it was racist in terms of like looking at just the experiences of Black archaeologists, there was also another woman who came up and asked me, is this even relevant to this organization in terms of even having it at SHA? Which for me, and once again, like coming from a Black studies background, our sort of standpoint and our research is always influential to how we do this and what we're doing. And therefore it's necessary to have a conversation even past and going into our scholarly research. But I think that there are always going to be people out there who it's like the saying, haters gonna hate. But there are always, but in reality, like there are always going to be individuals who fear what growth can come when people of color get together. But that is not our concern.
I'm glad you did explain the naming process and that you guys spent quite a bit of time thinking about the names. And, hearing this last response, that's really relevant, especially like you were saying for a Black society. The minute that you name it that, certain people are turned off and others are turned on.
Right.
And you're right, it's not your job to try to convince every single person. Like, you just need to create a safe place for, a community that's already that has needs to have those needs addressed. You don't need to address the needs of others who don't like what you're doing or just aren't interested.
Yeah, and it was very much an area because the Society of African Descended Archaeologists doesn't sound as appealing.
No, exactly.
And we said, if somebody's hesitant to join a Black organization, chances are they probably shouldn't join anyway.
Yeah.
Based off of our clearly stated goals of trying to, increase retention and so forth. But with that said, too, we didn't go into it, but the Society of Black Archaeologists instead of the Society for Black Archaeologists. That was intentional because we said we are predominantly comprised of archaeologists of African American descent, but the goal of our organization is for the communities that we work with and that we serve. So we didn't want to say that we're for Black archaeologists, we're for the community. We're just comprised of Black archaeologists.
You mentioned the oral, like any research we do is going to influence others. You guys were doing these oral histories with archaeologists like a year or so before the SHA started collecting their. So I wonder how many of those guys listened to your interviews and then were like, oh yeah, we probably should record some of that, because this whole first wave of cultural resource folks, they're all old and they're all retiring, and all we're going to have left is all these reports, right? But we won't have their experiences. So if they don't talk, in a way that everybody can listen, like your, oral histories with archaeologists. That information, or at least, not the information, but that experience is lost.
Yeah. And especially with the sort of anti-racism work that SHA is currently really pushing to its forefront, it becomes even more imperative of them to be critically reflective of their own histories. And being able to have conversations with their membership, especially a lot of their elder members, as to like the sort of key core values and how they've gone and nurtured this organization, will really shed light on its current position and what it wants to do with its future.
Yeah, and as far as the SHA goes, it started as an activist organization. It was a reaction of people who were doing, historical archaeology against what the SAA and other organizations were saying. And so they just broke off and started their own thing, 49 years ago. So starting with this reflexive introspection, that's actually pretty revolutionary. And they haven't been talking about that in archaeology for very long. So for this organization to start doing that to its own self is like just part of its own, activist nature.
Yeah. And we try to start our meetings with a check-in. So every time we have a Society of Black Archaeologists meeting, we have a check-in and say, how's everybody doing? What are some of the issues you all are dealing with? What are some of the successes you all have had? And we've realized in conversations with people, they talk about some issues are archaeologists, anthropologists, scholars of color generally don't get cited as much as their white peers. So we said, okay, how can we increase that? So we're thinking, well, let's move forward then. And every time an archaeologist of color publishes a book on archaeology, we'll make sure that somebody's going to write a book review of it.
Oh,
because book reviews help improve citation. And these are things that you may not see. You see the product of it, but you don't hear about the backstory as to how and why that occurs. So that's one other side project that we do. And these check-ins are important for getting that information and understanding what we need to do as an organization to help with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we've been recording for quite a while. Is there anything else you wanted to say? This is going to be for, I don't really know who all listens to it, but there's hundreds. It's amazing how many people listen to the CRM Archaeology podcast. There's hundreds, sometimes some shows, more than 1,000, sometimes even more than a couple thousand. So is there anything you wanted to say real fast before we...
I would say definitely check out our interview that we did with Bill a couple of years ago in terms of his experiences in CRM.
The rantings of a crazed man. If you want a crazy, listen to some craziness, go ahead.
No, it was good.
And I'll include the link to the SBA website in the show notes and you guys' profiles, or do you have your own websites? We can put the Facebook link to that too. Folks can join that way.
Yep, societyofblackarchaeologists.com, all one word. societyofblackarchaeology.com. It's archaeologists. Societyofblackarchaeologists.com.
Yeah.
And then
you don't always get your own domain. Sometimes you gotta be funky with the last couple letters,
And if you have any questions, comments, or want to join our list, you can send an email to sbarchaeologists@gmail.com.
All right, cool. Well, thanks, guys. I'm so glad you were able to talk.
No, thank you for the opportunity and space.
No problem.
That's it for another episode of the CRM Archaeology Podcast. Links to some of the items mentioned on the show are in the show notes for this podcast, which can be found at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/CRM Arc Podcast. If you like the show and want to comment, please do. You can leave comments about this or any other episode on the website or on the iTunes page for the episode. You can also email me at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com or use the contact form on the podcast webpage. If you'd like us to answer a question on a future episode, email us. Use the contact form on the website or tweet your questions with the hashtag CRMArcPodcast, or you can tag @ArcPodNet in your tweet. Please share the link to the show wherever you saw it. If you share CRM archaeology related items on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere else for that matter, be sure to use the hashtag CRMArc so the community can see and comment. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, you can do so on iTunes or on Stitcher Radio. You can also type the name of the podcast into your favorite podcasting app and subscribe that way. Don't forget to go over to iTunes and leave a review of the show. It helps us get noticed so more people can find our podcast and benefit from the content. Also, send us show suggestions and interview suggestions. We want this to be a resource for field technicians everywhere, and we want to know what you want to know about. Also, please consider donating to the Archaeology Podcast Network. Your donations help fund our bandwidth and contribute to our editing costs. Thanks to everyone for joining me this week. Thanks also to the listeners for tuning in, and we'll see you in the field. Goodbye.
Adios.
Bye.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
They still had tons of alcohol. Anyway, that was our whole like late night dick in a box thing.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to arcpodnet.com/members for more info.